Hello, everybody, and welcome to our after church tea time today. We will be having a chat around the sermon from Lorenzo and Alexandra on transcending all suffering. And so I think one of the things that stood out for me was definitely the quote that Alexandra shared around understanding the root, well, the cause of the suffering, to understand where it really comes from. And yeah, it's something that's probably been a lesson for me across various times in my life, just to actually take a step back and to understand how I'm putting myself into that space. And I think through my journey with Twin Flames Universe and COU, it's just become a lot clearer that suffering is generally always related to the feeling more than the situation. So yeah, I'd like to open it up to both of you and see how you feel about it and what stood out for you in terms of today's sermon.
Yeah, one of the big things that stood out to me at the beginning was with the card reading, and I think it was the first card she pulled was just solitude, and that just really hit me because I feel like that's a really big, important piece of understanding your feelings and really like knowing why you're feeling the way you are, and maybe why patterns of pain or suffering are coming up in your life is just having time like to sit with yourself and to be in solitude. And I really love that piece and how it was like the key to really allowing you to tap into your intuition and to being able to understand what's like I was saying, kind of what's really causing the pain for you. And like you said, it kind of maybe just takes a moment to step back and really like be alone, quiet your mind, and recognize that, everything is okay. And like you are in control in a way of your emotions and your reality with the tool that we have, the mirror exercise. And like that, no matter what suffering you're going through, like, it's always going to end. Like suffering is not our eternal state. Like our eternal state is peace and joy and love. And like that's kind of what they in the sermon actually brought up for me too, was with the little parable of the snowdrop flower and the angel shedding the tear, and that flower coming to light in the wintertime for Adam and Eve, and bringing that ray of hope. I got teared up just with Alexandria too. That was so powerful, that message of there's always hope, and suffering will never last forever.
Yeah, there was a very big emphasis at the beginning of the sermon about spring and the fundraiser, and spring is in the air in the Northern Hemisphere. But here in the UK, it's very chilly. The blossoms are coming out, but I was in the park earlier on and I was frozen. There seems to be a lot of energies building for this spring. Everyone's been talking about it. It seems the beginning of this spring seems a lot more hopeful than last year. I mean, having said that, I can't really appreciate that yet. But there's good things happening because we've been doing the work and we've been moving forward to free ourselves from suffering. And it is about how things appear to the mind, because the same circumstance may cause one person a lot of suffering, but not the next person, because the second person has learned how to not allow that to disturb their mind. And it is to do with the tools, the mirror exercise, and being able to deal with everything that comes up effectively. But don't get caught up in thinking that one should avoid suffering. It's not about avoiding the bad feelings. It's about acknowledging everything that's there. I mean, some of the bad feelings that come up to be cleared are very painful because they've been there for a very long time. But if you've been given the opportunity to bring those feelings to the surface so that they can be cleared, so they can be acknowledged, so that they can be released, that's exactly what you want. And that is something that our twin flames all do rather well. Yes, it's about acknowledging the feelings. Every feeling that you have must be validated. You don't want to invalidate yourself by saying that a bad feeling isn't a big deal. I mean, if you're feeling it, then it's real for you. And every feeling deserves to be acknowledged. That's the same as accepting where you're at. And from there, only once you've accepted that and acknowledged that, you can move through those feelings very quickly and come to a state of peace and feel really good on the other side of each piece. And even if you immediately afterwards go straight into another upset, that's okay. You're moving through them.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned the spring fundraiser as well, because I think it's like if any of you remember the autumn fundraiser last time around, it was actually quite fun, and so it should be quite exciting to participate in the Sweet Spring fundraiser. And yeah, I think that there will definitely be additional information shared soon. So it is definitely something to look forward to. And just in line with the theme of spring that that came through from Lorenzo and Alexandra's sermon is just that almost that concept of it's always darkest before the dawn, like, and so just the reminder that there will always be hope. Spring will always come, and spring is definitely a much more hopeful time, just because life starts to feel a lot more vibrant. And with that vibrancy, we can't not go along with it. It would be kind of a little bit schizoid personality to not have that infectious feeling affect you and help you to just transcend some of that energy. And one of the interesting things that, like I'm in South Africa, so where the Northern Hemisphere is going into spring, we're actually going into autumn. So, it's just a different mindset. And I think that it kind of, as the days become longer and brighter in other places, our days kind of, our daylight becomes shorter, but nights are longer and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's always an interesting perspective to look at these two things and go, what does the feeling of this season really evoke? And I think that the feeling of spring, even though it's not in South Africa, that feeling coming through from the sermon and the concept of spring and the hope that it brings, I definitely feel the sense of it, regardless of the fact that we're actually going into autumn. And yeah, I think it's just, as you said, Rachel, it's literally, there's a lot. It wasn't, I don't know if it was Rachel or Hannah, but one of you or both of you shared the feeling of that it's sometimes just a mindset, and that you kind of need to shift. You need to shift out of that perspective, which also came through very nicely in the meditation, in just observing those feelings and realizing that that's not your identity, that you are a person because you're a person and not because you have this feeling or you identify with this feeling. So yeah, it was just a nice reminder to just again ground into our personal space and to allow ourselves to uplift ourselves, really is what is the big message that I got. And I feel like that contributes significantly to diminishing that feeling of suffering.
Yeah, completely. I agree. It is about that feeling, and like the feeling that was really encompassed with the sermon and about in the pre-sermon. I remember she said something about, as a unionist, you go through these periods of maybe what looks like suffering, but then and you have the faith that what comes out of that is joy and it's peace, and it's like the alchemizing of that pain into something heavenly and into like that springtime feeling of bliss. And yeah, it's interesting too, because I'm in Michigan in North America, and we just had a massive snowstorm 2 days ago. And it was funny because it's like March 3rd, spring's supposed to be here, but God loves to be God. He loves to be funny. And I guess there was this huge snowstorm that was like for 12 hours, just wild. And yeah, so that kind of just like reminded me too a little bit of this sermon, and like no matter how crazy it gets, like internally or externally, like spring is still coming. We can't deny that. It's on its way to us. And like before we know it, even though we had this storm, like spring's going to be here. The sun will be out more, the days will be longer, and like more joy and peace will be with us. And yeah, and like that is the goal, is to have, I guess, in a way, the ability to navigate the winter wonderlands that we experience, and to continue having the faith in our hearts that spring's always coming. And eventually, we'll have like way less of the wintry feelings and way more of the spring and summer feelings and the heavenly feelings, and that it's okay and it's safe to have feelings that aren't always perfect and heavenly. And yeah, and the quote too that they spoke about at the beginning, I want to meditate on that more, because that was really powerful to really understand that once you understand, I think it was something like, once you understand the cause of suffering, then you'll be able to overcome suffering. And yeah, I can't really say a full interpretation of it personally, but it just feels powerful and feels like, yeah, like once I can do that, like I'm going to overcome suffering. And I have the faith that I know it's possible, and it's going to happen for everybody. And yeah, like I just trust and know that it's not God's plan for us to suffer. It's God's plan for us to be joyful and to have joyful experiences and to overcome all of our suffering. And I know He's given us all of the tools and abilities to do that. So I feel really grounded after this sermon, and really grateful for the message that they'd shared.
Yeah, there certainly seems to be a theme this week about the seasons, most certainly, because everything has its season. I don't know if I'm going a little bit off topic, but yeah, the Southern Hemisphere maybe is feeling a little bit left out because I was talking about spring. But there's a show in the UK called Stargazing Live. It comes out every March, and one year they broadcast live from Australia because the Southern Hemisphere is tilted towards the Orion spur of the Milky Way, so you can see straight into the Milky Way, which you don't get in the Northern Hemisphere. And I thought that was lovely. And in 750 million years, the Northern Hemisphere is going to be tilted towards that part of the Milky Way. So they said it's just a matter of being patient, but like none of us are going to have to wait that long. I mean, what I'm trying to say is everything has its seasons. We've got spring, summer, winter, and much bigger galactic seasons. But when it comes to the cycles of moving through your feelings, working through upsets, coming to a state of peace, moving to the next cycle of healing, we're actually moving through that very quickly, even if it doesn't feel like it is. We can't actually see how fast we're moving forward. There's so much happening behind the scenes. And what Granville said about it being darkest before the dawn. Yeah, that's something that Jeff referred to in a class where he said it always feels hardest just before your final breakthrough, because you're clearing that final core of separation. And I made a meme the other day with a TFAS quote that Shaleia shared. It said, you'll hit that brick wall and you'll burst through into an everlasting horizon of togetherness. So yeah, it feels like it's it's about clearing those last bits of separation. I mean, there'll be some separation until perfect union, but you reach that tipping point where all your good can come in, and you can receive, or you can receive God to that level. And it's always good to remind yourself that you're not your blocks, you are not your upsets. You don't have to get attached to any feeling, good or bad, because feelings are here today, gone tomorrow. If you come into a new place of peace, you don't have to hang on to that. You can let that pass. And then you might move into a place where it feels like that your peace has gone away, but it hasn't really. It's still there at the core, but you've gone deeper. You've moved into a new place that's requiring peace. And you've done that to enable you to spread greater peace there. And that's the process, just bringing God to all the places where we thought that God wasn't, even though that is an illusion.
Yeah, and you know what, and that came through quite strongly in the sermon as well. And you know, it's just a good reminder from the sermon that all those places where there is a sense of suffering is really just for us to realize that we're looking for God in those places, and we're looking for love in those places, and that we can actually bring the love and the God back into those places. And it might just have been a conditioning thing. It might have been that we missed the message or the lesson in it. And so that awareness, and I think for me, the awareness is always the stronger thing. So the minute you are aware of something, you are able to move through it faster, because you're actually sitting in that space of observing it. And I think that's kind of the bigger lesson, is just to remember to be an observer in those places and not necessarily let them overtake everything else that's happening with you. And I think it's, you know, it's something that also came through in the sermon, is that it's okay for all of those feelings to be there. And sometimes I feel like we sometimes belabor the bad a lot longer than we celebrate the good. And so it's it's to remind ourselves to, one, be an observer in those places, and two, to allow all the feelings to move through us, regardless of what they are. So it's literally about suspending the judgment, which we probably inadvertently do until we start giving ourselves permission to stop doing it. So I think it was a nice sermon just to say, you know, it's okay to be you. It's okay to have these things going on. You are not the feeling. You have the tools to deal with the feeling. You just have to give yourself permission to allow the feelings to actually surface.
Yeah, completely. And like you were saying, once they do surface, then we can handle them and look at them and bring God to those places. Because what I think they mentioned too is that suffering is only ever separation from God. And so when we can realize, like, oh, it's God's not in this place, I can bring him right there. And then he's the one that ends that suffering. That love of God can be brought to any place and end the separation in that area. And like they would said a lot of times in there too, like that it's safe to like it's just safe to I think you mentioned that too. It's safe to feel those feelings that aren't good, because even if we're experiencing separation or experiencing suffering, like our true state, we've never left God, and we never will, and we never can. And like yeah, it's not possible. And like we are one with God, and like he's our creator and our love and our father, and we can never be far from him. And it's only us and the voice of the ego that convinces us and tells us that we are separate, but we have the power over the ego with love, because love can overcome anything the ego believes. And so yeah, it was a really nice reminder of we're not our feelings, we're not what the ego tells us or what the world tells us. We're only love, and we're only what God tells us we are. And we have so much power as children of God to create that beautiful garden inside of our own mind to experience in our life, and pick out like all of the weeds that are in there. And it's okay, because that's kind of the fun of it, I guess. Like it's the fun of being alive and living in life, is having those moments where, oh no, am I going to make it? Like, am I going to get through this? And having a feeling of just, being afraid. I'm not saying I do not choose fear, but being able to overcome that and look over your shoulder at it and say like, oh wow, like that was just what it was. It was an illusion. And now have this new piece where, God's shown me the truth in this area, and it's beautiful. And, I overcame it. And it's really nice to be on this path and to be learning to do that, and to be building my confidence in that. And yeah, like you said, to be just remembering who I am every day, and having compassion for myself in the days that are hard, and that suffering is more prevalent in my consciousness. But then each time being able to more quickly go and give myself the love that I need. And yeah, it's a process. And I think back to like a year ago and before finding these teachings, and just how much I desired this to help, like I desired a solution to ending my suffering. And this is just so real, and this is so divine, and it's the way. And I'm grateful to have found it, and to be, becoming love, and to be, having the mere exercise as a way of life, and to be, yeah, like I said, kind of building my confidence and knowing that I can overcome anything and any suffering with love. It's really powerful.
Yeah, that was beautiful what you said there. It's worth emphasizing that you find places in consciousness where it feels where we thought that God wasn't there, but God can't be absent from anywhere. God was always there. It's just us that perceived him as not being there. It's us that believed that he wasn't there. So it's an issue about perception. And what we got to do in these places, and once we've accessed these feelings, is to be present with ourselves there, with loving. Sometimes our loving presence is enough. Observe the feeling, observe the fear until it dissolves and comes to a place of unconditional love. And as you go deeper and deeper, you come to a place where you're able to access more and more deeper feelings that you weren't able to access before. And certainly I noticed in my own healing recently, my default reaction every time I came across a feeling that I didn't really want to feel was to run from it. And so it takes discipline to stay present with that feeling, to not run away, to be with it, because they're completely safe. There's nothing in there that can hurt you. You've already experienced these types of bad feelings plenty to know what it's going to be. I mean, you come to a point where what you experience, you go deeper, yeah, but it's unlikely that you're going to experience anything new. It's just more of the sentimental feelings that you've already been having. It might be fear, it might be fear of loss, it might be a feeling of being unloved. All of them are untrue. All of them are illusions. Being able to locate these places and go there and stay in those places, take the time for yourself for as long as you need, reminding yourself that you are worth taking the time to love really thoroughly in these places, really commit to yourself in these places. That's what brings results, piece by piece.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, and I think that's really the trick, is to accept that it doesn't all have to happen at once. To accept that we do it one step at a time, to the point where we start to not only see and feel the difference, but also that we just know that it's intrinsically there. It's kind of the difference between doing the mirror exercise at the beginning versus later down the line. There's a level of mastery that comes with being patient with yourself and being compassionate with yourself and learning at a pace that's good for you and healing at a pace that's good for you. And I think that, you know, something that's probably been one of my bigger lessons was just that the feeling comes up when you're ready to deal with it. It will not come up sooner, and it's probably not compassionate for certain feelings to come up too quickly. It's kind of the layering that you work through to become mastered, so that when the big thing does come up, you are in a much more comfortable space to deal with it. And yes, it's going to feel dark at some points, and it's going to feel like stuck energy at some points. But at the same time, it's probably the best, most compassionate pace for us as individuals. And that's why we also don't all heal exactly the same thing at exactly the same time. We might be healing components of it, but as a collective, the shift progressively happens. And I think that's really the thing. It's about allowing yourself to progressively work through things and to not try and take on too much too quickly from a healing point of view. And, you know, it's a lesson that we've learned countless times and shared countless times from various people that are in the community. We probably experienced it ourselves. You know, just the taking on too much too quickly tends to become exhausting. And some people will stop, and other people will progress. People will try to push through. But the fact is, it's kind of just to remember that there's a progressive pace that's compassionate, and very quickly that feeling of suffering in every space of your life does reduce. It actually just does reduce. We just have to allow ourselves to heal through the things that are coming up. And I think, it's something that we've learned and heard often, is that, that consistency and persistence. And it's something that you were speaking to earlier, Rachel, in terms of hitting that wall and then breaking through. And there's an interesting concept, and it's probably a little bit of an idiom, but it's literally that there's always a breakdown before a breakthrough. And if we look at things in that perspective, it does help us to have faith. It does help us to have hope, which is something that also came through in Alexandra and Laurentzio's sermon.
Yeah, I love everything you touched on there. Like especially just the part about that it's progressive and it's really a process, and it's not all going to happen at once. And I think that like that's really like a big beautiful part of it all, because it does strengthen your faith and it strengthens your hope, and it really strengthens you like completely. Just that it doesn't happen at once and that it's not supposed to. And yeah, and something that kept coming to me too, if I can remember it. No, I can't. It's lost from my mind. But yeah, I think it's like this process of really like, if you have like a bucket of salt water and you're pouring fresh water into it, that's kind of the concept I was thinking of. It's like, it's not going to immediately turn into all fresh water. It's a slow progress of all the salt water running over and the fresh water taking its place. And yeah, but then it's purified, and then it's drinkable, and then it's, kind of just like how we're purifying ourselves. It's kind of like that process of pouring the clean water into the places that are salty inside of us, and like that literally are salty. Like we have like sad, upset feelings and emotions, and we're pouring love into them. And yeah, it's going to always, though, like always result in, a purified space. And once this is what I was thinking too, is once we've chosen this path, it's really nice. One of you brought this up for me. It's like nice to know, like we've already felt all of these feelings. I think you said that, Rachel, and like it's nothing to be afraid of. We've felt these feelings before, and like once you choose to like walk the path with God, you can trust that like even if you make a mistake, it's not something that's totally devastating, and like the worst is kind of over for you once you choose to walk with God. It's kind of just purifying everything, all the karma and things out of your system, and recognizing like, yeah, I've already felt all these feelings. Now I just kind of have to go back in and give them the love that I really didn't have the awareness to give back then when it really happened, or whenever the moment was or emotion was that's coming up, and to now having the tool to purify yourself with the mirror exercise, and to know that once you choose God, like that really is the ending of all suffering. Like honestly, it's how I feel, is because like even if you do still have pain and suffering and upsets, like you trust in God, and you build that faith in Him to know that he'll heal you of it and purify you, and and that it's safe to trust in His process, and in the choice to purify yourself and the choice to walk with God. He wants you walking with Him, and He's so happy to have you with us and with Him. And it's only going to lead you to one place at the end of the day, which is heaven on earth. And everyone can do it. And I think that's the end goal for everyone, to be on the path with God, like holding your hand and loving themselves, and, you know, finding that stride where they find the confidence to overcome anything with God, and they know and they can trust that completely.
Yeah, there's a lot of juicy stuff that you both said there. Yeah, certainly it's impossible to clear everything all in one go. It would not be possible. It would literally be too much leaving the consciousness. What I found is that it took a long time of doing the inner work to clear the surface level stuff before I was able to go into the really deep stuff, because it took that long to gain the mastery to be able to deal with that, because there's no way I would have been able to handle the deep stuff right at the beginning. I would have been like, ah! And yeah, so it takes patience, because it's a full-on process in itself. There's a maturing process. And you want to do it the most compassionate way for you. Yeah, perhaps I didn't choose the most compassionate way for myself, because I hadn't learned how to be compassionate with myself. I am learning that now. And what you said, Hannah, about the salt water, yeah, I'm going to bring in another kung fu analogy, because what my teacher talks about is something called some fa, and that's where you have a glass of water, and every time you train incorrectly, you're putting a drop of blue ink in that water. Every time you practice correctly, you're putting a drop of clear water in there, and so the water becomes clearer and clearer. And it's a learning curve. I mean, don't be hard on yourself if you don't think you're doing it perfectly. In truth, there are no mistakes on this journey. Everything is part of the learning process. And there comes a point where more and more clarity comes in, and you come to a point where you realize exactly why everything on your journey had to unfold in exactly the way that it did, and you'll see why, and you'll think, oh, right, it's just this. So wherever you're at, wherever you're moving through, like, nothing's gone wrong. Everything's going to be okay. All you have to do is keep going. If you keep choosing love, then the destination can only be love.
Awesome. Rachel, I think you wrapped it up quite nicely, so I don't have anything more to add. How about you, Hannah?
No, that was beautiful. I loved it. Thank you.
Awesome. So thank you both for joining After Church Tea Time today. To everybody that has joined us, thank you to you as well. Please also feel free to like and subscribe to our Church of Union YouTube channel, where you will find all our previous After Church Tea Times and any other live discussions that have happened in the Unionism Spiritual Discussion Group on Facebook. And we will see all of you soon. Thank you, everybody.